Have you ever wondered what quiet conversations inside your own mind might be shaping, without you even noticing? The ideas in this story revolve around a simple but bold claim that belief, imagination, rest, and the words we repeat to ourselves can influence healing, success, wealth, guidance, even the way our relationships unfold. Not through force, but through something quieter, something internal. So what really happens when a thought is repeated long enough and felt deeply enough to become real? There is an idea that appears simple at first, almost too simple to take seriously. It begins with a quiet statement, repeated again and again, a sentence spoken internally until it stops feeling like a wish and starts feeling like a fact. The suggestion behind it is this: when a person repeats an affirmation with understanding, knowing exactly what they are saying and why they are saying it, the mind gradually moves toward accepting that statement as true, not through force, not through argument, but through familiarity. Think about how often the mind accepts things simply because they are repeated long enough. A thought heard every day slowly stops sounding like a thought at all. It begins to feel like reality. According to this idea, the same process can be used deliberately. To affirm means to state that something is so. And the claim is that if a person holds firmly to that inner statement, maintaining the attitude that it is already true, even when appearances seem to contradict it, the mind eventually responds. There is a story told about someone who applied this approach while praying for the healing of a loved one. The method was simple. She imagined her sister surrounded by an endless ocean of peace and love. In her mind, every distortion, every troubling image, every fearful thought was washed away by that ocean. She did not picture the illness. She pictured the opposite harmony, calm wholeness. And she affirmed this idea several times a day. Days passed. At the end of 2 weeks, her sister returned for an examination. The results surprised everyone involved. The condition that had previously appeared in the medical images was gone. The new X-ray showed nothing. To the person who had been praying, the experience reinforced a principle she had been practicing all along. If the mind holds firmly to a conviction, if it continues affirming a reality until that inner state becomes natural, the outer situation may eventually reflect it. Now, whether someone accepts that explanation literally or not, the process itself is clear. Repetition, belief, and emotional certainty slowly shift the inner atmosphere of the mind, and once a thought has settled deeply enough, it begins influencing perception, behavior, expectation, and even the way a person approaches life. But there is an interesting detail often overlooked. Even when someone tries to deny a thought, they may unknowingly affirm it. If a person keeps saying, "I don't want this," the mind still hears the central image being repeated. In that sense, denial can still be a form of affirmation. So the instruction becomes very precise: choose carefully what you affirm. Speak inwardly about what you wish to establish, not what you wish to avoid. Then repeat it with awareness, understanding the meaning behind the words. Because the argument here is not that repetition alone creates change. The words must be spoken with intention, with comprehension, with emotional participation. When that happens, something interesting begins to occur. The mind slowly enters a state where the statement no longer feels artificial. Instead, it begins to feel natural, even obvious. And once the mind accepts something as true, it starts acting in harmony with that belief. This leads into another approach described in the same tradition, a method sometimes called the argumentative method. The name might sound unusual, but the idea behind it is surprisingly straightforward. This method traces back to a man named Phineas Parkhurst Quimby, who lived in Maine during the 19th century. Quimby was known for working with individuals suffering from various illnesses, and he believed that many physical conditions were connected to deeply rooted beliefs in the mind. Instead of relying solely on suggestion, he often used reasoning. Imagine sitting with someone who feels completely convinced that their condition is permanent, that something outside themselves has caused it, and that they have no control over it. Quimby's approach was to challenge that assumption step by step. He would begin by explaining that fear, negative beliefs, and distorted thought patterns can embed themselves deeply in the mind. Over time, these patterns may influence the body. Then he would reason with the person patiently. If the subconscious mind created the body in the first place, if it formed every organ, every nerve, every tissue, why would it not also contain the intelligence necessary to restore those structures to health? He encouraged the patient to consider that the illness might not be an external enemy at all. Instead, it could be the physical expression of a mistaken belief, something that had quietly formed inside the mind over time. And if a belief could create a pattern, then a new belief could replace it. The process became almost like a courtroom trial held inside the mind. On one side were the fears, the doubts, the assumptions that something was permanently wrong. On the other side was the argument that the same intelligence responsible for creating the body still existed within it. Quimby would gather mental evidence in favor of that idea. He would reason carefully, dismantling the patient's fears and replacing them with a new explanation, one that emphasized the presence of a healing power already operating within. Eventually, he would reach a kind of verdict in what he called the courtroom of the mind. The decision favored health rather than illness. The goal was not merely to convince the patient intellectually. It was to create a shift in belief so strong that the subconscious mind accepted the new conclusion as truth. Once that acceptance occurred, Quimby believed the body would begin responding accordingly. The argumentative method, then, was not about arguing in the usual sense. It was about replacing a deeply held belief with a new understanding through clear reasoning and conviction. In time, Quimby began using another technique as well, something referred to as the absolute method. This approach moved away from reasoning and toward contemplation. Instead of analyzing the cause of illness or explaining mental patterns, the person practicing this method simply focused on the qualities associated with the divine or the highest ideal they could imagine. They might quietly repeat or contemplate ideas such as boundless love, infinite intelligence, absolute harmony, perfect wisdom. As the mind rests on these qualities, something subtle happens. Attention lifts. The mind begins to feel as though it has entered a different level of awareness, what some describe as a higher spiritual wavelength. In that state, the person praying might silently think of the individual they are helping. And rather than concentrating on the problem itself, they imagine that the presence of love, harmony, and intelligence is dissolving everything unlike itself. The troubled condition, whatever it may be, is pictured as fading in the presence of that greater harmony. Some people have compared this process to sound wave therapy. In medicine, certain ultrasound machines send powerful waves into a specific area of the body. These waves vibrate at high speeds, influencing tissue and sometimes breaking apart unwanted deposits. The analogy suggests that focused spiritual contemplation generates a similar kind of influence, not physical sound waves, but waves of thought and feeling. As the mind rises into that atmosphere of peace and love, it is said to radiate harmony outward. The troubled condition is gradually neutralized by that presence. Whether one interprets this metaphorically or literally, the central idea remains the same. The practitioner does not fight the problem directly. Instead, they immerse the mind in the qualities of harmony so completely that discord loses its hold. Interestingly, Quimby himself began using this absolute method more frequently in the later years of his work. One story often associated with him involves a woman who had been bedridden for years. She lived in constant fear, convinced that certain passages in religious texts foretold punishment or suffering. Those interpretations had trapped her mind in anxiety and confusion. When Quimby met her, he did not accept the idea that her condition was purely physical. He believed the root of the problem was the fearful interpretation that had taken hold in her mind. Through conversation, he reframed those beliefs. He explained the passages she feared in a completely different way, one that emphasized compassion and inner transformation rather than punishment. As he spoke, he also focused internally on the idea of vitality, intelligence, and harmony already existing within her. Something shifted. The woman suddenly felt a sensation she had not experienced in years. Moments later, she stood up and walked without her crutches. Quimby described this moment as if the truth she accepted had rolled away the stone of fear and ignorance that had imprisoned her mind. Whether one sees the story as literal, symbolic, or psychological, the message behind it is consistent with the earlier ideas. Beliefs shape experience. Change the belief, and the pattern may begin to change as well. Another method mentioned alongside these approaches is called the decree method. Here the emphasis is placed on the power behind words spoken with certainty. The suggestion is that words become effective when they are backed by genuine feeling and conviction. If someone truly believes that the same creative power moving through the universe is supporting their statement, their confidence grows naturally. There is no need to strain, struggle, or attempt to force results. Power in this view does not need assistance. Trying to add force to it would be like trying to add strength to gravity. The role of the person speaking the decree is simply to state the desired condition clearly and with assurance. One small example illustrates how this method is sometimes used. A young woman found herself constantly bothered by a man who repeatedly called her, pressured her for dates, and appeared unexpectedly at her workplace. She felt unable to escape the situation. Rather than confronting him directly, she turned inward and spoke a quiet decree. She affirmed that he was released to his proper place in life, that both of them were free, and that her words carried authority within the infinite intelligence of the mind. She stated the outcome calmly and with certainty. Soon afterward, the man disappeared from her life completely. She never saw him again. Those who practice the decree method interpret experiences like this as evidence that spoken conviction influences events in subtle ways. Others might say the shift occurred because her inner attitude changed. Perhaps she behaved differently, projected confidence, or stopped reinforcing the dynamic that had kept the situation alive. Either way, the central principle remains the same. Words spoken with belief shape inner states. Inner states influence behavior and perception, and those shifts can alter the direction of events. The decree method captures this idea in a single line drawn from ancient scripture. You shall decree a thing, and it shall be established unto you. Taken literally, it suggests that certainty gives strength to a statement. Taken psychologically, it points to the same pattern we have seen again and again. What the mind consistently affirms, it gradually accepts. And what the mind accepts, it begins to express in life. So the process comes full circle. Affirmation, reasoning, contemplation, and decree. 4 different approaches pointing toward the same possibility. That the thoughts a person nurtures, repeats, and believes may quietly shape the direction of their experience. Not overnight, not magically, but steadily. As the inner world slowly reorganizes itself around the ideas it accepts as true. There is a striking claim woven through these teachings, and it begins with a simple observation about the mind itself. Most of what happens inside us never reaches the surface of conscious awareness. Thoughts rise and fall throughout the day. Decisions are made, conversations happen, plans form. But beneath all of that activity, something deeper continues working quietly and constantly. The argument presented here is that the greater portion of our mental life belongs to this deeper level. In fact, it is suggested that more than 90% of our mental activity takes place outside the field of conscious awareness. If that is true, then the visible thinking we do during the day, the decisions we analyze, the problems we debate, represents only a small portion of the forces actually shaping our lives. What lies beneath, according to this view, is the subconscious mind. And the description given of this deeper mind is not passive or neutral. It is portrayed as a force that is always moving in a life-supporting direction, always constructive, always seeking growth. In other words, its tendency is lifeward. This idea carries a remarkable implication. If the subconscious mind naturally moves toward life harmony and preservation, then the body itself is constantly being supported by an intelligent process we rarely notice. Think about what your body is doing right now without your involvement. Your heart is beating. Your lungs are breathing. Your blood is circulating. Cells are dividing and repairing tissues. Food is being digested, nutrients distributed, waste eliminated. All of this continues whether you are thinking about it or not. You do not consciously command your heart to beat. You do not tell your lungs to expand or instruct your stomach how to digest food. The processes simply continue. According to the philosophy presented in the original material, these functions are not random mechanical reactions. They are guided by the subconscious intelligence within the body itself. The subconscious mind in this view is the builder and caretaker of the body. It works continuously, 24 hours a day. It never sleeps. Even when the conscious mind rests at night, the deeper mind remains active. The heart continues pumping. The organs continue their work. Cells continue renewing themselves. The body continues repairing whatever damage occurred during the day. And because this process is always active, the subconscious mind is constantly attempting to preserve life and restore balance. This is why its tendency is described as constructive, not destructive, not indifferent, constructive. From this perspective, many of the impulses people experience in life, those sudden urges to improve, create, explore, or grow, are interpreted as messages arising from that deeper level of mind. Have you ever had a sudden idea that seemed to appear from nowhere, or felt an inner push to move forward? Change direction? Attempt something new? Sometimes these signals arrive as intuition, sometimes as a hunch, sometimes as a quiet conviction that does not come from logical analysis but feels certain anyway. In this framework, those impressions are said to originate from the subconscious mind. Great aspirations, visions for a better life, and sudden creative insights are described as emerging from the deeper mind's constant movement toward growth. The subconscious is portrayed as urging us forward. Rise, advance, grow, explore. This forward momentum appears not only in creative thought but also in moments of extraordinary courage. Historical accounts have described situations where people believed themselves weak, sick, or incapable of action until an emergency forced something deeper to respond. During disasters, for example, individuals who had been bedridden sometimes found the strength to stand and move in order to save others. In those moments, a powerful instinct emerged that overrode their previous limitations. Within the philosophy described here, that response is interpreted as the subconscious mind expressing its deepest impulse, the preservation and protection of life. Artists, musicians, and writers often describe similar experiences in creative work. Ideas appear unexpectedly. A melody forms in the mind. A story unfolds seemingly on its own. Many creators have spoken about the sense that inspiration comes from somewhere deeper than deliberate effort. They may struggle with a problem consciously for hours or days. Then suddenly the answer arrives when the mind relaxes. From this perspective, the subconscious mind acts like an inexhaustible reservoir of insight. But if the subconscious mind is responsible for maintaining the body and generating creative insight, how does it interact with the conscious mind we experience every day? To explain this relationship, the original material introduces a comparison drawn from the nervous system. The body contains two major systems of nerves that correspond symbolically to the two levels of mind. The first is the cerebral spinal system. This system governs voluntary action. It allows you to move your muscles, speak, and receive information through your senses. When you see a color, hear a sound, taste food, or touch an object, the signals travel through this system. Because of this, it is associated with the conscious mind, the level of awareness that observes the external world and makes deliberate decisions. The second is the sympathetic nervous system, sometimes called the involuntary system. This system operates automatically. Its center lies in a complex network of nerves near the solar plexus, often referred to historically as the abdominal brain. Through this system, the body regulates its internal processes, circulation, digestion, glandular activity, and countless other vital functions. These processes occur without conscious instruction. Because of this automatic activity, the sympathetic system is associated with the subconscious mind. Together, these two systems form a bridge between thought and physical expression. When the conscious mind accepts an idea as true, that idea produces a pattern of activity in the voluntary nervous system. In turn, this activity influences the involuntary system. And through that pathway, the idea is said to reach the subconscious mind, the creative level responsible for shaping bodily functions. The explanation offered is simple but profound. Every thought accepted by the conscious mind eventually travels deeper into the subconscious. Once accepted there, it begins influencing the body and the circumstances of life. In this sense, thoughts become blueprints. The subconscious mind does not argue with the blueprint it receives. It simply works to express it. Imagine an architect preparing a design for a building. The construction crew does not debate the drawing or question the plan. They follow the blueprint as given. The subconscious mind in this analogy acts in a similar way. If the conscious mind repeatedly accepts ideas of strength, health, and harmony, the subconscious attempts to build according to those patterns. But if the conscious mind accepts ideas of fear, resentment, weakness, or limitation, those patterns also become blueprints. The subconscious cannot refuse them. It simply acts on whatever specifications it receives. That is why the teachings emphasize that accepted thoughts eventually appear as physical and external realities. They are not seen as abstract mental events. They are seen as instructions passed to the creative intelligence within the body. To illustrate this point, the original text points to the remarkable organization within living cells. Every organ in the body is composed of countless cells working together with extraordinary precision. Each cell performs specific functions. Each responds to signals. Each cooperates with neighboring cells in a vast network of activity. When scientists study these structures, they discover an astonishing degree of coordination. Groups of cells behave almost like small communities of intelligence. They communicate, they respond, they adapt. The body as a whole functions as a unified system because these cellular groups follow the guidance of a central directive. In the philosophy presented here, that directive is linked to the subconscious mind. The conscious mind supplies ideas. The subconscious mind carries out the work. But here the discussion takes a crucial turn. If the subconscious mind naturally moves toward harmony and life, why do illness and disorder sometimes appear? The explanation offered is that human beings often interfere with the body's natural balance through destructive thought patterns. Fear, worry, jealousy, anger, resentment. These emotions are not seen merely as psychological states. They are described as disturbances introduced into the mental blueprint. When such patterns are repeated often enough, they register in the subconscious mind. And once registered there, the subconscious begins expressing them through the body. This does not mean that every illness originates solely from thought. The philosophy is more subtle than that. Rather, it suggests that destructive emotional patterns can weaken the harmony that normally sustains health. Think about what happens during intense stress. Muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, the heart beats faster. Hormones flood the bloodstream, digestion slows. In small doses, these reactions are natural protective responses. But when fear or anger becomes a constant state of mind, the body remains in a prolonged condition of imbalance. From this viewpoint, destructive emotions interfere with the normal flow of vital forces throughout the body. Harmony is the body's natural state. Disease, therefore, is interpreted as a departure from that harmony. The body constantly attempts to restore balance, but persistent negative patterns make that restoration more difficult. Consider the analogy of a river. A healthy river flows smoothly in its natural direction. But if obstacles are placed in its path, logs, debris, or artificial barriers, the current becomes disrupted. Water may stagnate in some areas while rushing violently in others. Remove the obstacles and the river returns to its natural flow. In the same way, the teaching suggests that the body naturally moves toward health when destructive thought patterns are removed. Fear is described as particularly harmful because it constantly sends signals of danger to the subconscious mind. Jealousy and resentment create internal tension. Anger and hostility disturb the nervous system. These emotional states act like repeated instructions telling the subconscious mind that conflict and disharmony are present. Since the subconscious mind acts upon what it receives, it begins expressing those conditions in the body and the environment. But the reverse is also said to be true. When the conscious mind replaces destructive thoughts with constructive ones, the blueprint changes. Affirmations of harmony, peace, and vitality introduce new instructions into the subconscious mind. Gradually, the body begins responding to those instructions. The deeper intelligence within the body works continuously to rebuild balance. It is important to understand that the teachings do not describe this process as immediate magic. Just as the body does not become ill instantly from a single moment of worry, it does not restore perfect harmony instantly from a single positive thought. Patterns take time to establish. But once the mental environment changes consistently, the subconscious mind begins expressing that new pattern. This is why the text repeatedly returns to the idea that harmony is the natural state of life. Health is normal. Strength is normal. Growth is normal. From the moment of birth, the body moves toward development. Cells multiply. Tissues expand. Bones strengthen. The entire organism evolves through continuous growth. This pattern reflects the fundamental law of life. Where there is life, there is growth. Where there is growth, there is harmony. Where there is harmony, there is health. Therefore, the teachings conclude that illness represents a temporary interruption of this natural pattern, not its true direction. By removing destructive thought patterns and restoring harmony within the mind, a person allows the subconscious intelligence to resume its normal work. The deeper mind then continues doing what it has always been doing, supporting life, maintaining balance, and guiding the body toward wholeness. In this way, the subconscious mind is portrayed not as a mysterious or dangerous force, but as a faithful ally. It operates quietly beneath the surface of awareness. It accepts the ideas given to it. And according to the blueprint it receives, it builds the reality of the body and the life around us. Whether one interprets these ideas symbolically or literally, the underlying message is consistent. The thoughts we accept repeatedly do not remain abstract. They become patterns. Patterns become habits of feeling. Habits of feeling influence the body behavior and perception. And over time, those patterns shape the direction of our experience. The subconscious mind, always moving toward life, simply responds to the instructions it receives. There is a point in this philosophy where the discussion turns from what the mind can do to why people so often fail to see results when they try to use it. The explanation offered is surprisingly simple and also a little uncomfortable. According to this view, the main obstacle is not lack of desire. It is not lack of effort. In many cases, the problem is exactly the opposite. Too much effort, too much strain, too much anxious trying. The claim is that people often block the response they are seeking because they do not fully understand how the subconscious mind operates. They treat it as something that must be forced, persuaded, or pushed into action. But the deeper mind does not respond to pressure in that way. It responds to acceptance. It responds to belief. And above all, it responds to the feeling that something is already true. The argument begins with a simple principle. Whenever the subconscious mind accepts an idea, it immediately begins to act upon that idea. It does not wait. It does not debate the idea or examine it critically the way the conscious mind does. Instead, it mobilizes its resources and begins organizing conditions according to the nature of the accepted thought. If the idea is constructive, the subconscious moves toward harmony and positive results. If the idea is negative, the same law operates in the opposite direction. This is why negative thinking can produce confusion, failure, and frustration. It is not because the mind intends harm. It is simply because the subconscious acts on whatever premise it receives. So the question becomes obvious. Why do people sometimes pray, visualize, or affirm something for weeks or months, and still see no change? According to the philosophy in the original text, the answer often lies in hidden contradiction. A person may consciously ask for something while simultaneously holding deep doubts about it. They may say they believe a solution exists, yet repeatedly think things like, "I see no way out," or "This problem is getting worse," or "Nothing is working." Those statements may appear casual, but they carry emotional weight. When a person continually speaks or thinks in this way, the subconscious mind receives mixed instructions. It is like entering a taxi and giving the driver 6 different destinations within 5 minutes. The driver becomes confused. Eventually, he may refuse to move at all because the instructions contradict each other. The subconscious mind reacts in a similar way. It requires a clear direction. If the conscious mind sends conflicting signals, hope followed immediately by doubt, the deeper mind cannot establish a consistent pattern. The result is stagnation. Nothing changes. The teachings, therefore, stress the importance of a clear idea. A person must arrive at the firm inner decision that there is a solution to the problem. The moment that decision becomes genuine, the mental atmosphere changes. Instead of uncertainty, there is expectation. Instead of anxiety, there is quiet confidence. This shift is not about pretending something is true when you secretly believe the opposite. It is about allowing the mind to settle into the possibility that the answer already exists somewhere within the deeper intelligence of life. Once that acceptance occurs, the subconscious mind begins its work. But there is another obstacle that frequently interferes: mental strain. People often try to force the result they desire. They attempt to compel the subconscious mind by sheer willpower. They concentrate intensely, repeating statements while feeling tension in their minds and bodies. They try harder and harder, believing that effort will strengthen the result. Yet the philosophy described here argues that this approach actually produces the opposite effect. It introduces what is called the law of reversed effort. This law was described by a psychologist who observed that when imagination and willpower conflict, imagination usually wins. Imagine being asked to walk across a wooden plank placed on the floor. The task would be easy. You would step across without hesitation because there is no emotional pressure attached to the act. Now imagine the same plank suspended high above the ground between two buildings. Your desire to cross the plank might remain the same. But suddenly another image appears in your mind, the image of falling. That picture grows stronger with every step. Even if you try to force yourself forward, the imagination begins projecting the possibility of failure again and again. The more you struggle to suppress the image, the stronger it becomes. Eventually, the effort collapses. You step back. The law of reversed effort has taken over. The stronger image in the mind, the image of falling, overpowers the weaker desire to cross. This same process can happen when people try to use their minds to solve problems. They say they want healing, success, or improvement, but inside they picture the opposite. They imagine obstacles, failure, disappointment. Then they try to fight those images with sheer willpower. But willpower cannot erase imagination. If anything, the struggle often intensifies the negative image. The subconscious mind always responds to the dominant idea. And the dominant idea is not necessarily the one spoken aloud. It is the one felt most strongly. That is why the teachings emphasize relaxation. Relaxation allows the conscious mind to release its tight grip on the situation. When tension drops, the imagination becomes more receptive to constructive ideas. The phrase used repeatedly in the original material is simple: easy does it. Instead of straining to control every detail, the person is encouraged to focus gently on the desired outcome. Not the complicated path toward it, not the obstacles that might arise. Just the end result. Imagine how you would feel if the problem were already solved. How would your body feel? How would your breathing change? What emotional state would naturally arise if the difficulty had disappeared? The key is to experience that feeling now, not as a forced mental exercise, but as a quiet inner mood. This shift in feeling is considered the real signal to the subconscious mind. It tells the deeper intelligence that the new condition has been accepted. Another instruction given in the text is to avoid obsessing over the details of how the solution will appear. The subconscious mind is described as possessing far greater resources than the conscious mind. It can organize circumstances in ways the conscious mind could never anticipate. The task of the conscious mind, therefore, is simply to hold the image of the fulfilled desire and allow the deeper processes of life to bring it about. This is where imagination becomes the central tool. Imagination is not treated as idle fantasy. It is described as the creative faculty that shapes mental experience. When imagination forms a vivid picture and emotion supports that picture, the subconscious mind receives it as a blueprint. But imagination works best when it is free from pressure. If a person imagines something while simultaneously worrying that it will not happen, the conflicting emotions weaken the impression. So the recommended approach is almost childlike in its simplicity. Picture the desired condition as though it already exists. Allow yourself to feel the satisfaction of its completion, then relax. This process is often practiced in a quiet, drowsy state. The reason for this is that when the body begins to relax deeply, especially just before sleep, the conscious mind becomes less active. Critical thoughts fade. Doubts lose their intensity. In that calm, half-awake condition, the imagination can impress ideas on the subconscious mind more easily. Think of the moment just before you drift off to sleep. Your attention becomes still. Thoughts slow down. Images appear naturally in the mind. This is considered one of the most receptive moments for influencing the subconscious. The negative images that might normally interrupt your focus are less likely to appear. The mind becomes quiet enough to accept the idea you wish to plant. At that point, you simply imagine the result you desire as if it were already real. Feel the relief. Feel the satisfaction. Let the scene unfold naturally in your mind. Then allow yourself to fall asleep. The text gives examples of people who use this technique while facing difficult situations. One young woman was involved in a complicated legal case that seemed to have no clear solution. Each delay increased her anxiety, and her imagination began filling with images of loss, bankruptcy, and failure. Eventually, she realized that her desire for a positive outcome was constantly being contradicted by the fearful pictures she rehearsed in her mind. So she changed her approach. Each night before sleep, she entered a relaxed state and imagined the case resolved successfully. In her imagination, she heard her lawyer telling her that the matter had been settled harmoniously. She replayed the scene repeatedly, adding details of tone, expression, and relief. During the day, whenever fearful thoughts returned, she replaced them with the same mental scene. Over time, the picture of success became stronger than the image of failure. Eventually, the legal matter resolved in exactly the way she had been imagining. The example is not presented as proof that imagination alone controls events. Rather, it illustrates the emotional logic behind the method. When the mind releases resistance and consistently holds a constructive image, it creates a psychological environment where solutions become easier to perceive and act upon. Another way to understand this process is through the idea of agreement between two parts of the mind. The conscious mind represents desire. The subconscious mind represents creative power. When these two aspects agree, when thought and feeling align, the result is described as inevitable. But when they conflict, the result becomes uncertain. The conscious mind may say, "I want this," while the imagination says, "It will never happen." In that situation, the subconscious mind accepts the stronger impression. And most of the time, that stronger impression comes from imagination. This is why trying to force results often backfires. The tension of effort strengthens the awareness of struggle. Instead of picturing success, the person keeps thinking about the difficulty of achieving it, and that image becomes the dominant one. The solution, according to this philosophy, is surprisingly gentle. Stop fighting the mind. Stop forcing the outcome. Let the imagination create a simple picture of fulfillment. Feel the emotional atmosphere of that fulfillment. Then relax. Allow the deeper intelligence of the mind to respond. When the inner resistance fades, the subconscious mind begins moving toward the idea that has been accepted. In this way, results are said to come more easily when strain disappears. The moment effort becomes relaxed expectancy. The mental conflict dissolves. And when the conflict dissolves, the creative processes of the subconscious mind can finally begin operating without interference. At a certain point, the discussion shifts toward a subject that tends to stir strong feelings in almost everyone: money. Not simply how to earn it, but how the mind relates to it. The central claim presented here is surprisingly direct. Wealth, before it ever appears in outer form, begins as a conviction within the subconscious mind. That idea may sound abstract at first. After all, most people have been taught that money comes only through hard labor, opportunity, or circumstance. Yet the argument here does not deny work or practical effort. Instead, it suggests that the inner attitude toward wealth quietly determines whether those outer opportunities appear at all. According to this view, a person who continually feels poor in thought will eventually encounter conditions that mirror that feeling. Not because the world is punishing them, but because their subconscious mind is operating on a blueprint of limitation. The opposite is also proposed to be true. A person who gradually builds a conviction of abundance within the mind begins to notice different possibilities, different openings, and different results in the world around them. The idea is not that repeating the words "I am rich" automatically produces wealth. In fact, the teachings warn strongly against that kind of empty repetition. Words alone mean very little if the deeper mind rejects them. Imagine someone standing in front of a mirror insisting over and over again that they are prosperous, while feeling completely convinced that the statement is false. Each repetition actually intensifies the contradiction inside their mind. The conscious voice says one thing, the inner feeling says the opposite. And the subconscious mind, which responds to dominant feeling rather than surface words, accepts the feeling instead of the statement. In that situation, the affirmation fails because it provokes internal argument. The subconscious does not accept ideas that clash violently with what a person secretly believes to be true. So the approach described here takes a different path. Instead of forcing grand declarations that the mind cannot accept, it begins with something gentler and more believable. Rather than saying "I am wealthy" when that thought feels impossible, a person might simply dwell on the idea of wealth itself. Just the word, wealth, or success. These words, the text explains, carry emotional associations that the mind can absorb without resistance. When repeated quietly and thoughtfully for several minutes at a time, they begin to plant a new mental pattern. The goal is not to persuade the conscious mind with logic. The goal is to allow the subconscious mind to become familiar with the atmosphere of abundance. And once the feeling of wealth begins to feel natural, even slightly natural, the subconscious starts responding to that atmosphere. The teachings emphasize doing this several times a day for a few minutes at a time. Not with strain, not with anxiety, just calmly, as though one were reminding the mind of something already present. The repetition works in the same way any repeated thought eventually works. It settles gradually into the deeper layers of awareness until it becomes a habitual mental state. This is where the idea of an invisible means of support enters the conversation. Most people rely entirely on visible forms of support: a salary, a business, a savings account, investments. When those sources falter, fear appears immediately because it seems as though security has disappeared. But according to this philosophy, those visible forms are not the true source of wealth. They are simply channels. Behind those channels lies a deeper reservoir of ideas, creativity, intuition, and opportunity. The subconscious mind is described as an inexhaustible storehouse containing countless possibilities. When someone learns to rely on that deeper reservoir, they develop what the teachings call an invisible means of support. This does not mean ignoring practical reality. It means recognizing that wealth often begins as an idea before it becomes money in a bank account. A new invention, a business insight, a creative solution, a partnership, a sudden opportunity that had not been visible before. All of these can originate in the mind long before they appear in the outer world. The person who trusts this deeper reservoir does not feel completely helpless when circumstances change, because they believe that new channels of supply can appear at any time. Another point emphasized strongly in the teachings is the danger of what might be called negative declarations about money. People often speak about financial difficulty without realizing the effect their words may have on their own thinking. Statements such as, "There is never enough," or "Everything is getting worse," or "I will never catch up," may seem like simple observations. Yet when these statements are repeated frequently, they become instructions to the subconscious mind. The text refers to this habit as signing blank checks. Each fearful statement is like a check written to the subconscious mind, instructing it to produce more of the same condition. If a person constantly declares shortage, the deeper mind accepts shortage as the blueprint and begins expressing it. The solution proposed is not denial of reality, but interruption of the negative pattern. Whenever a fearful statement begins to form, "I cannot pay this," or "I will lose everything," the instruction is to stop the sentence immediately and replace it with a constructive phrase. For example, "By day and by night I am being prospered in all my interests." This kind of statement is considered effective because it does not contradict the present situation directly. It simply introduces a new direction. Instead of arguing with the subconscious mind, it gently suggests improvement. Another important idea in this section concerns the emotional response people have toward the success of others. The teachings claim that envy and criticism can quietly block the flow of abundance in a person's life. When someone constantly condemns wealthy individuals, calling them dishonest, greedy, or undeserving, they create a strange psychological conflict. On one hand, they desire prosperity. On the other hand, they associate prosperity with negative qualities. This contradiction sends mixed signals to the subconscious mind. If wealth is connected with corruption or wrongdoing in the imagination, the deeper mind may resist allowing that condition to appear in one's own life. In this way, criticism becomes a hidden barrier. The recommended alternative is surprisingly simple: rejoice in the prosperity of others. When you see someone succeeding financially, the suggested response is to wish them even greater success. This reaction dissolves envy and aligns the mind with the idea of abundance rather than scarcity. In the same way that fear magnifies lack appreciation, magnifies opportunity. The subconscious mind then receives a consistent message that wealth is acceptable, desirable, and welcome. There is also a deeper psychological reason behind this advice. When people dwell on resentment toward others, their attention becomes fixed on limitation. They think constantly about what they do not have. But when they celebrate the prosperity of others, the mind begins focusing on abundance instead. The emotional tone shifts from bitterness to possibility. This shift may appear subtle, yet over time it reshapes the internal environment in which decisions and perceptions are formed. And according to the philosophy presented here, that inner environment eventually shapes external conditions as well. Another practice suggested in the text involves repeating the word wealth quietly before sleep. The reasoning behind this technique is that the mind becomes more receptive during the moments just before drifting into sleep. Critical thinking relaxes, and the subconscious mind becomes more accessible. Repeating the words slowly, almost like a lullaby, allows the feeling associated with it to sink deeper into awareness. The emphasis, again, is not on strain. It is not necessary to force the imagination or visualize complex scenes. Simply dwelling on the word and allowing the feeling of abundance to arise naturally is considered sufficient. Over time, this repeated suggestion becomes a familiar pattern within the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind, which magnifies whatever is impressed upon it, begins expressing that pattern through ideas, opportunities, and circumstances. The text compares the subconscious mind to a kind of universal financial institution. Whatever deposit is placed into it, whether thoughts of wealth or thoughts of poverty, is multiplied and returned with interest. If the deposit consists of fear, lack, and resentment, those patterns expand. If the deposit consists of confidence, gratitude, and expectation, those patterns expand instead. This metaphor emphasizes responsibility. The mind is constantly receiving deposits through thought and emotion. Every belief about money becomes part of the account. So the central instruction is simple: choose carefully what you deposit. If you wish to experience prosperity, dwell on ideas that correspond with prosperity. Not in a forced or unrealistic way, but gradually, consistently, and without internal contradiction. The process resembles planting seeds in fertile soil. Once the seed is planted, it must be allowed to grow. Digging it up repeatedly to check its progress only prevents it from taking root. In the same way, constructive thoughts must be allowed to settle into the subconscious mind without being immediately canceled by fear. If a person repeats a positive statement for 5 minutes and then spends the rest of the day worrying about loss, the negative thoughts cancel the impression that was planted earlier. This is why consistency is emphasized so strongly. Constructive thinking must become the dominant pattern, not the occasional exception. As this new pattern stabilizes, the subconscious mind gradually accepts it as the natural state of things. And once that acceptance occurs, the deeper intelligence begins expressing it in practical ways. Ideas appear, opportunities arise, unexpected connections form. The person may not always recognize the exact pathway through which these changes unfold, but the overall direction begins shifting toward greater prosperity. This entire approach rests on a single foundation. Wealth begins in consciousness before it appears in physical form. Labor and effort may still be required, but the mental atmosphere in which those efforts occur determines whether they produce results. When the subconscious mind is convinced of lack, even great effort can lead nowhere. When the subconscious mind accepts abundance, effort tends to align with opportunity. So the teachings return again and again to the same instruction. Guard your thoughts about money. Avoid speaking fear into existence. Rejoice in the success of others. And quietly allow the idea of wealth to become natural within your mind. Once that conviction forms, the outer expression of prosperity becomes much easier to experience. At this point, the discussion moves into a question that many people quietly struggle with. Is it truly acceptable to desire wealth? For a surprising number of people, the answer inside their mind is uncertain. They may want financial security, comfort, and freedom. Yet somewhere in their thinking, there is a shadow of guilt attached to the desire. They have heard phrases repeated throughout life that make wealth seem suspicious or morally questionable. Statements like, "Money is the root of all evil," or "filthy money," have a way of settling into the subconscious without much examination. The argument presented here challenges that entire assumption. It begins with a simple declaration: it is your right to be rich. Not rich in the narrow sense of hoarding money or dominating others, but rich in the broader sense of living fully, freely, and abundantly. The philosophy insists that human beings are not here merely to scrape by. Life is described as an expanding process. Growth, expression, and development are its natural direction. A person should be able to surround themselves with beauty, enjoy comfort, and experience the fullness of life without apology. Wanting these things, according to this view, is not greed. It is part of the natural urge toward expansion that exists within every living being. When a person says they wish to be prosperous, what they are really saying is that they want a fuller experience of life. They want freedom from constant worry. They want the ability to contribute, to create, to support others, and to enjoy the world around them. In that sense, the desire for wealth is simply the desire for a richer life experience. Money itself, the text reminds us, is only a symbol. It represents exchange. It allows energy, effort, creativity, and value to move between people in a practical form. When money circulates freely in society, goods and services flow more easily. People are able to exchange their talents and efforts without the burden of carrying physical goods from place to place. In earlier times, wealth might have been measured by the number of cattle someone owned or the amount of grain they stored. Today, it is measured through currency and other financial instruments because those forms are more convenient for exchange. But the principle remains the same. Money is not the source of value itself. It is simply the means through which value moves. The comparison offered in the text is vivid. Think about the circulation of blood within the body. When blood flows freely, carrying oxygen and nutrients through every organ and tissue, the body is healthy. But when circulation becomes blocked, illness follows. In a similar way, money flowing through a person's life is considered a sign of economic health. It indicates movement, exchange, and vitality. Problems begin when people interrupt that flow with fear. Fear causes individuals to hoard, to hide, to withdraw from the natural exchange of life. The text compares this to economic illness. Instead of allowing money to circulate naturally, people become tense about losing it or suspicious of anyone who has more of it. Gradually, this tension creates a mental environment where money seems distant or difficult to obtain. The teachings argue that condemning money produces a particularly destructive effect. When someone constantly speaks about money as something corrupt or shameful, they create a subconscious resistance to having it. It becomes psychologically uncomfortable to attract what they have labeled as evil. The subconscious mind, which responds to emotional conviction rather than surface reasoning, begins aligning with that negative label. If wealth equals wrongdoing in the imagination, the mind quietly avoids it. That is why the instruction given here is clear. Cleanse your mind of strange and superstitious ideas about money. Money is neither holy nor evil. It is simply a tool. Consider the metals from which coins were once made. Gold, silver, copper, and iron exist in the earth as natural elements. No one would look at a piece of copper or a fragment of silver and call it immoral. It becomes meaningful only when human beings attach value to it as a medium of exchange. In modern times, even paper currency is nothing more than arranged atoms, molecules, organized in a particular form. Yet people often treat it as though it carries moral qualities of its own. The text challenges this misunderstanding directly. There is nothing inherently wrong with money. The difficulty lies in the human attitudes surrounding it. Another common belief addressed in the text is the idea that poverty somehow possesses moral value. Some individuals have absorbed the notion that being poor makes them spiritually superior or virtuous. They may feel that wealth corrupts character, and therefore they unconsciously resist prosperity. The teachings argue that this belief is misguided. Poverty is not a virtue. It is described as a mental condition, an unhealthy pattern of thinking that restricts life's natural expansion. Just as a physical illness would prompt someone to seek treatment, the philosophy suggests that persistent lack should prompt examination of the mental patterns that produced it. The reasoning behind this view is tied to the idea that life itself moves toward growth and fullness. Plants expand toward sunlight. Trees grow taller year by year. Animals seek nourishment and safety. Human beings naturally desire improvement, comfort, and opportunity. To deliberately embrace deprivation as an ideal, the text argues, is to resist that natural movement. But here, the philosophy introduces an important balance. While wealth is not something to fear or reject, it must also not become the sole aim of life. Money, when pursued as the only goal, can distort priorities and narrow a person's perspective. A life devoted entirely to accumulating wealth may neglect other essential aspects of human experience: peace of mind, health, love, creativity, and service to others. The teachings caution against making money an idol. If a person says, "Money is all I want, nothing else matters," they may indeed acquire wealth, but they may also discover that something vital is missing. True fulfillment requires balance. A healthy life includes financial stability, but it also includes emotional harmony, meaningful relationships, creative expression, and the satisfaction of contributing to the well-being of others. In this sense, wealth is only one element within a larger picture of abundance. The philosophy encourages people to pursue prosperity while also nurturing these other dimensions of life. The ideal situation is one in which financial success supports personal growth rather than replacing it. The text even suggests that individuals who understand the workings of the subconscious mind can achieve both at once. They can enjoy material prosperity while maintaining inner peace and emotional balance. This combination is described as the true abundant life. Another theme emphasized repeatedly is the importance of developing the correct emotional relationship with money. Instead of fearing it or resenting it, people are encouraged to adopt an attitude of appreciation. One technique described in the text involves repeating a simple affirmation several times each day, expressing genuine appreciation for money while declaring the intention to use it wisely, constructively, and generously. The purpose of this practice is not to flatter money itself, but to reshape the subconscious attitude toward it. By associating money with wisdom, responsibility, and positive use, the mind begins to view wealth as a natural and welcome part of life. The affirmation also emphasizes circulation. Money is imagined as flowing freely, coming in, being used constructively, and returning multiplied. This reinforces the idea that prosperity thrives through movement rather than hoarding. Once again, the philosophy returns to the theme of mental atmosphere. If a person constantly condemns money, that condemnation becomes a barrier. The subconscious mind interprets the emotional message and begins resisting what is being criticized. But when a person speaks about money with appreciation and calm confidence, the inner resistance dissolves. The subconscious becomes receptive instead of defensive. Throughout the discussion, there is a clear effort to separate two ideas that people often confuse. One idea is healthy prosperity, having the financial means to live well, support others, and express one's talents in the world. The other idea is obsessive greed, pursuing money alone while neglecting every other aspect of life. The teachings reject the second while encouraging the first. They insist that wealth, when placed in its proper context, can be a powerful ally in building a meaningful life. It allows people to pursue education, support families, contribute to charitable causes, explore creativity, and experience the beauty of the world around them. But none of these benefits arise when wealth becomes the sole purpose of existence. That is why the text repeatedly returns to the concept of balance. Peace of mind matters, health matters, love and harmony matter. The joy of expressing one's abilities and helping others matters. Financial prosperity is meant to support these experiences, not replace them. In the end, the philosophy proposes a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing wealth as something dangerous or shameful, it encourages people to see it as a natural extension of life's creative energy. When the subconscious mind accepts abundance as normal, opportunities for prosperity begin appearing in unexpected ways. Yet at the same time, the deeper aim of life remains broader than money alone. A truly rich life includes financial security, but it also includes inner calm, meaningful work, loving relationships, and the freedom to express one's highest potential. When these elements exist together, wealth becomes what it was always meant to be: a useful symbol of exchange, supporting a life that is full, balanced, and alive. At this point, the discussion turns to a word that is often misunderstood: success. In everyday conversation, success is usually measured in numbers. Income status, influence, recognition. Yet the argument presented here invites a different way of looking at it. Success, in its deepest sense, is not merely the accumulation of wealth. It is successful living. Successful living means a life marked by peace, joy, and inner satisfaction. It means waking each day with a sense that what you are doing matters. It means feeling aligned with your abilities, expressing your talents freely, and contributing something worthwhile to the world around you. In this view, the real treasures of life are intangible. Peace of mind, harmony, integrity, security, happiness. These are not things that can be stored in a bank vault or locked inside a safe. They arise from the deeper level of the mind. When these qualities are present, success follows naturally because life itself becomes rich and meaningful. So the first step toward success begins with a very personal question. What do you love to do? The idea sounds simple, yet for many people it is not easy to answer. Society often pushes individuals toward practical choices rather than fulfilling ones. People choose careers because they seem safe, or because others expect it, or because the path simply appeared in front of them. Over time, they may forget that success grows most easily where genuine interest exists. According to the philosophy behind these teachings, success begins when a person discovers the work that truly engages them. When the activity itself feels rewarding, effort becomes natural. Energy flows easily because the mind is interested and alive. Imagine someone who studies medicine simply to earn money. The work may become mechanical and exhausting, but imagine another person who feels deeply drawn to relieving human suffering. That person studies not merely for income, but out of fascination and compassion. The difference in motivation changes everything. A doctor who truly loves the field does not stop learning after receiving a diploma. They attend lectures, read research, study new methods, and remain curious about the mind and body throughout their career. Their work evolves because their interest remains alive. Success in that sense is not a destination reached once and then forgotten. It is an ongoing relationship with one's work. But what if someone does not yet know what they love to do? That uncertainty is addressed directly. The suggestion offered is to turn inward and ask for guidance from the deeper intelligence of the mind. The request itself can be simple. The infinite intelligence within me reveals my true place in life. By repeating such a request quietly and sincerely, the mind begins opening to new directions. The answer may not arrive immediately as a dramatic revelation. Instead, it may appear gradually as a growing interest, a quiet pull toward a particular field, or a series of opportunities that seem to appear almost by accident. This inner guidance is described as a feeling rather than a logical argument. A hunch, a sense of peace about moving in a certain direction. Once that direction becomes clear, the second step toward success emerges. Specialization. It is not enough to simply enter a field. The philosophy suggests that a person should aim to become exceptionally knowledgeable in a chosen area. The individual who devotes focused attention to mastering a specific branch of knowledge gradually develops insight and skill that set them apart. Imagine a young chemist beginning a career. Chemistry itself contains many different paths: organic chemistry, analytical chemistry, industrial chemistry, biochemical research. If that young scientist chooses one area and studies it deeply, exploring every detail and advancement in that field, their expertise grows rapidly. The key here is enthusiasm. When curiosity drives the work, the effort required to learn more does not feel like a burden. It becomes part of the adventure. Specialization also reflects another idea embedded in the philosophy of success service. True success does not arise from self-centered ambition alone. The aim must extend beyond personal gain. The work should contribute something meaningful to the lives of others. When a person pursues a profession only to make a living, the result may feel empty. But when the same profession becomes a way to help guide, heal, teach, build, or inspire others, the motivation becomes larger than the individual. This brings us to the third step toward success: the desire must benefit more than oneself. The reasoning is simple but powerful. When an idea serves only the individual who holds it, the circle of energy remains incomplete. But when an idea moves outward when it helps others grow, prosper, or improve their lives, the circle closes. The benefit returns to the originator naturally. In other words, success flows most easily when it contributes something valuable to the world. To illustrate these ideas, several stories appear throughout the discussion. One involves a man who had dreamed since childhood of becoming a successful actor. As a boy, he worked on a farm doing ordinary chores, mowing hay, feeding animals, carrying out the simple routines of rural life. Yet throughout those years, he carried a vivid mental picture in his mind. He imagined his name shining in bright lights on the front of a large theater. He pictured audiences gathering posters displayed the excitement of opening night. He rehearsed this image again and again in his imagination, not as a distant fantasy, but as something that felt almost real. Eventually, he left home and entered the world of film and theater. The journey was not immediate or easy. He took small jobs, worked behind the scenes, and gradually found opportunities to perform. Years later, the day arrived when he walked past a theater and saw his name in the bright lights exactly as he had imagined it. For him, the power of sustained imagination had played a decisive role. The image he had held for so long had shaped his actions, his choices, and his persistence. Another story concerns a pharmacist who once felt trapped in a modest job. He earned a small weekly income and expected to continue working for someone else for the rest of his life. Retirement seemed far away and uninspiring. One day he was encouraged to raise his expectations. Instead of assuming he would always work for others, he began imagining something different. In his mind, he pictured himself owning his own pharmacy. He visualized the shelves, the arrangement of medicines, the sound of customers entering the store. He imagined clerks working beside him, and a bank account that reflected the success of the business. This was not idle daydreaming. Each day, he mentally rehearsed the scene as though it were already real. At first, the situation around him did not change, but the image in his mind gradually influenced his behavior. He became more attentive to the business, more curious about how pharmacies operated, more willing to take initiative. Unexpectedly, he lost his job. What seemed like a setback turned into a turning point. He accepted a new position in a larger company, gained experience managing operations, and eventually saved enough money to make a down payment on his own store. When the doors of that pharmacy finally opened, he realized something remarkable. It looked almost exactly like the store he had been arranging in his imagination for years. The story is offered as an illustration of how mental rehearsal can shape reality. By living mentally in the future, he desired the pharmacist aligned his actions with that vision until it became real. The same principle appears in business and professional life. Some individuals quietly practice the habit of imagining success in their daily work. A stockbroker, for example, once adopted the technique of holding imaginary conversations with a mentor he respected. In these conversations, the mentor congratulated him on wise investment decisions and praised his judgment. The broker replayed these scenes repeatedly in his mind. Over time, the image of competence and confidence became natural to him. His decisions improved, his clients prospered, and his reputation grew accordingly. The imagination had helped reinforce the qualities he wished to develop. Similar methods have been applied to everyday situations as well. Suppose someone hopes to receive a promotion. Instead of worrying about competition or rejection, they might imagine a supervisor congratulating them on their advancement. They hear the words, see the expressions, and feel the satisfaction of accomplishment. By repeating that mental scene frequently, they condition their mind to accept success as a normal outcome. This shift influences posture, tone of voice, initiative, and countless small behaviors that shape how others perceive them. Even practical matters such as buying or selling property have been approached using the same principle. One method described involves imagining the final act of a completed transaction. If someone wishes to sell a house, they might picture themselves removing the "for sale" sign from the front yard because the property has already been purchased. They feel the satisfaction of completion, carry the sign to the garage, and put it away in their imagination. By rehearsing the end result, rather than worrying about the process, they strengthen the expectation that the sale will occur. Another approach involves a quiet affirmation directed toward the deeper intelligence of the mind. The individual might state calmly that the right buyer is being drawn to the property, someone who will value and enjoy the home. The emphasis remains the same throughout these examples. Picture the end result. Feel the emotional reality of its completion. Allow that picture to become familiar. In this philosophy, the conscious mind acts as the starting mechanism. It introduces the idea, the desire, the image. The subconscious mind acts as the motor that brings the idea into expression. But the motor begins its work most effectively when the conscious mind relaxes. Strain and anxiety interfere with the process. That is why quiet moments of stillness are often recommended. Sitting peacefully for a few minutes, letting the body relax and focusing gently on the desired outcome, allows the deeper mind to receive the message without interference. The process resembles planting a seed. Once the seed is placed in the soil, the gardener does not dig it up every hour to check whether it has sprouted. Growth takes place beneath the surface. In the same way, once an idea is impressed upon the subconscious mind, the best approach is often to release it with confidence and allow circumstances to unfold. When these principles are applied consistently, success begins to look different from the narrow definition many people hold. Success is no longer limited to financial gain or public recognition. It becomes the expression of one's abilities in a way that brings satisfaction, contributes to others, and creates harmony within life. The individual who discovers meaningful work, develops deep expertise, and serves a purpose larger than personal ambition often finds that material success follows naturally, not as the ultimate goal, but as a byproduct of living fully. In this way, the teachings return to their original message: the mind is not merely a passive observer of life, it participates in shaping it. When imagination, intention, and action move in the same direction, the path toward success becomes clearer, and the life that unfolds is not merely profitable, but genuinely successful. There is a long-standing belief among many thinkers, scientists, and inventors that the mind does not stop working simply because the conscious part of it grows tired. In fact, some of the most important insights in science and discovery have been described as arriving only after the conscious mind has stepped aside. The philosophy presented in the original material places great emphasis on this idea. It suggests that the subconscious mind quietly continues working on problems long after deliberate reasoning has reached its limit. The pattern appears again and again in the stories of discovery. A scientist concentrates intensely on a difficult question. He studies every available fact, examines the evidence, and wrestles with the problem for days or weeks. Eventually, the conscious mind reaches exhaustion. The effort is set aside, sometimes out of frustration, sometimes simply because there is no other choice. Then something remarkable happens. Hours later, or perhaps during sleep, the answer appears suddenly. Not as a gradual deduction, but as a complete image or idea that seems to rise from somewhere beneath the surface of thought. Within this philosophy, that moment is interpreted as the response of the subconscious mind. When the conscious mind concentrates deeply on a problem, and then releases it, the deeper intelligence of the mind gathers the scattered pieces of information and rearranges them into a solution. Several well-known scientists are cited as examples of this process. Thomas Edison, for instance, was famous for the way he used brief periods of rest while working. When he encountered a stubborn problem in his laboratory, he sometimes relaxed in a chair with metal balls in his hands. As he drifted towards sleep, the balls would fall and wake him. In that brief moment between waking and sleep, new ideas often appeared. Edison believed those moments allowed the deeper mind to speak without interruption. Other inventors and researchers have described similar experiences. They focus intensely on a question during the day, then allow the mind to relax completely. When the tension of conscious effort disappears, the answer sometimes appears unexpectedly. One of the most striking illustrations involves a chemist who had been struggling with the structure of a molecule. For a long time, he attempted to arrange the atoms of benzene into a logical pattern, but every configuration he tried seemed incomplete. The problem remained unsolved, despite repeated attempts. One evening, exhausted from the effort, he allowed himself to rest. As he approached sleep, an image suddenly appeared in his mind, a snake turning around and biting its own tail, forming a circle. The image was vivid and unmistakable. When he woke, the meaning of the vision became clear. The molecule he had been studying was not arranged in a straight chain as previously assumed. Instead, it formed a ring structure. That image of the snake had revealed the circular arrangement of the atoms. What weeks of conscious reasoning had failed to produce was delivered instantly through the symbolic language of the subconscious mind. Another inventor who spoke openly about using the subconscious mind was Nikola Tesla. Tesla possessed an extraordinary ability to visualize machines in his imagination. Instead of building a device immediately, he often constructed the entire invention mentally first. In his mind, he would assemble each component, observe the movement of every part, and even imagine how the machine would wear over time. He described the process as though the device already existed within his inner vision. When he later built the machine in physical form, it behaved exactly as he had seen it in his imagination. Tesla explained that the subconscious mind seemed to organize the design while he contemplated the problem quietly. In another example, a naturalist spent weeks studying the faint impression of a fossil fish preserved in stone. The markings were incomplete, and he could not determine the full structure of the creature. He examined the fossil repeatedly, yet the missing features remained unclear. One night, he dreamed of the fish. In the dream, the entire structure appeared clearly, including details that had been hidden in the stone. When he woke, the image faded quickly from memory, but the impression remained strong enough to guide his next investigation. The following night, the dream returned, this time more vividly. The scientist placed pencil and paper beside his bed before going to sleep. When the dream appeared again, he sketched what he saw while still half asleep. The next morning, he compared the drawing with the fossil itself. Guided by the sketch, he carefully removed small layers of stone that had concealed additional features. To his astonishment, the hidden structures matched the details he had drawn from the dream. The subconscious mind had apparently reconstructed the complete form of the fish from the partial evidence available to the conscious mind. Medical discoveries have also been described in similar terms. One physician who studied diabetes struggled for a long time to understand how the disease could be treated. At that time, there was little effective therapy available, and the condition often proved fatal. The doctor immersed himself in medical research, examining every report and theory he could find. After long hours of study, he finally went to sleep one night with the problem still unresolved. During sleep, a solution appeared in a dream. The dream suggested extracting a substance from the pancreas of animals in a particular way. When the doctor awoke, the idea remained vivid. That insight led directly to the experiments that produced insulin, a discovery that later saved millions of lives. Stories like these are presented not as miracles, but as illustrations of a consistent pattern. The conscious mind gathers information, studies the facts, and frames the question clearly. Then, when the effort is released, the subconscious mind continues working in the background. Sometimes the response arrives through a sudden idea, sometimes through a dream, and sometimes through an unexpected image or symbol. The key point emphasized in the original text is that concentrated attention must come first. The subconscious mind responds to a clearly defined problem. It cannot organize information that has never been examined. That is why scientists and researchers often spend long periods analyzing a question before the breakthrough occurs. Their conscious attention prepares the material that the deeper mind later rearranges. But after that preparation, another step becomes essential: letting go. If the conscious mind continues struggling with tension and frustration, the deeper mind cannot easily present its solution. The interference of anxiety blocks the subtle process through which insights appear. Relaxation, therefore, plays a crucial role. When the conscious mind releases the problem, the subconscious mind is free to respond. This response does not always arrive immediately. Sometimes the answer appears the same night. Other times it may take days or even longer. The important factor is confidence that the solution exists and that the deeper intelligence of the mind is capable of finding it. The philosophy suggests that the subconscious mind possesses access to a vast storehouse of memory and experience. Every observation, every piece of knowledge, every fragment of information gathered throughout life is recorded there. When a problem is handed over to this deeper level, the subconscious can combine these stored impressions in new ways. It can connect ideas that the conscious mind might never consider linking together. For this reason, breakthroughs often arrive as complete insights rather than step-by-step deductions. One moment the problem seems impossible. The next moment the answer appears fully formed. A person may even wonder where the idea came from, because it feels as though it arrived from outside the mind rather than within it. In reality, the philosophy suggests it came from the deeper layers of one's own consciousness. Another story describes a man who had been held as a prisoner of war under extremely harsh conditions. While imprisoned in a coal mine, he decided that he would eventually escape and reach the United States. Each day, he pictured himself walking along a specific boulevard in Los Angeles. He imagined the buildings, the shops, and the streets as vividly as possible. He even pictured driving a car through the city and visiting the restaurants and stores he had seen in photographs. These images became so familiar that they felt almost real to him. Eventually, an opportunity for escape appeared unexpectedly. Through a series of fortunate circumstances, he managed to travel across several countries and eventually reached Switzerland. There he met an American couple who invited him to visit their home in California. When he finally arrived in Los Angeles and drove along the boulevard he had imagined for so long, the surroundings felt strangely familiar. The buildings looked exactly as they had appeared in his mental pictures. To him, the experience confirmed the idea that sustained imagination combined with belief could influence the course of events. While such stories may be interpreted in different ways, they illustrate the central theme of the philosophy. The subconscious mind responds to persistent images and concentrated attention. It organizes ideas, perceptions, and opportunities in ways the conscious mind cannot easily predict. This principle is not limited to scientific discovery or dramatic life events. It can be applied to ordinary problems as well. When faced with a difficult decision or question, the suggested approach is to gather as much information as possible, study the situation carefully, think about the options, define the problem clearly. Then once the facts are known, turn the question over to the subconscious mind. This can be done quietly, often before sleep, by simply stating the request inwardly. The mind is then allowed to rest without further strain. Later, perhaps during sleep, or during a moment of relaxation, the answer may appear as a feeling, a sudden idea, or an intuitive sense of direction. The solution might not arrive as a dramatic vision or dream. Sometimes it appears as a simple realization that feels obvious in retrospect. But the important principle remains the same. Concentrate on the problem. Release the effort. Allow the deeper mind to respond. In this worldview, the subconscious mind is not mysterious or supernatural. It is simply a deeper level of mental activity capable of organizing information in ways that the conscious mind alone cannot achieve. The scientist studying a molecule, the inventor designing a machine, the researcher interpreting a fossil, and the physician searching for a medical breakthrough all rely knowingly or not on this hidden process. Their concentrated attention plants the question. Their moment of relaxation allows the answer to grow. And when the insight finally appears, it often feels like a sudden flash of understanding, rising from the depths of the mind itself. As the discussion continues, attention turns to a part of life that every person experiences, yet rarely examines closely: sleep. Most people think of sleep as a simple shutdown, a period when the mind turns off and the body rests. But the philosophy presented here describes something very different. Sleep is not a time when the mind stops working. It is a time when one part of the mind becomes quiet, so that another part can continue its work more freely. When a person falls asleep, the conscious mind, the part responsible for reasoning, analyzing, worrying, and planning, gradually withdraws from activity. The endless commentary of the day begins to fade. Thoughts slow down. The senses relax their grip on the outer world. But beneath that quiet surface, the subconscious mind remains completely active. In fact, according to the ideas in the original teaching, the subconscious mind never sleeps at all. It continues its work 24 hours a day. During waking hours, it quietly regulates the countless automatic functions of the body: heartbeat, circulation, digestion, cellular repair. And during sleep, when the conscious mind is no longer interfering with its activity, it often performs these tasks with even greater efficiency. This is why sleep is described as one of the most powerful forms of healing available to the human body. Throughout the day, the body experiences strain. Muscles become tense, nerves are stimulated, and countless small stresses accumulate. Sleep provides the environment in which those imbalances can be corrected. While a person rests, the subconscious mind continues its patient work of restoration. Cells renew themselves. Hormonal systems rebalance. The nervous system settles back into harmony. Wounds repair. Infections are fought. Strength is gradually rebuilt. The body that wakes in the morning is not exactly the same body that lay down to sleep the night before. During the quiet hours of the night, subtle reconstruction has taken place. The teaching, therefore, treats sleep with a kind of reverence. It is not wasted time. It is one of the most essential processes through which life maintains itself. Because of this, the text warns strongly against the habit of neglecting sleep. Many people attempt to push themselves beyond natural limits. They remain awake late into the night, worrying, working, or distracting themselves with constant stimulation. Some even boast about needing very little sleep as though exhaustion were a sign of strength. But the body does not share that opinion. Without sufficient rest, the delicate systems that maintain health begin to suffer. The mind becomes irritable and confused. Concentration weakens. Emotional balance deteriorates. Over time, the body itself becomes more vulnerable to illness. Sleep deprivation does more than simply produce fatigue. It interrupts the natural rhythm through which the subconscious mind repairs and restores the body. From this perspective, sleep is not optional. It is a biological necessity, as essential as food or air. Yet the teaching goes further than physical restoration. Sleep is also described as a time when the subconscious mind may offer guidance. Throughout history, people have spoken of answers arriving during sleep, solutions to problems that seemed unsolvable during the day. A scientist wrestles with an equation for weeks and suddenly understands it after waking from a dream. An artist struggles with a creative block only to discover the missing idea while half asleep in the early morning. In these moments, it feels as though something within the mind has continued thinking during the night. The philosophy presented here embraces that interpretation. It suggests that when a question is clearly placed before the subconscious mind, the deeper intelligence within us continues working on it during sleep. Without the interference of conscious doubt or anxiety, the subconscious mind is free to examine the problem in ways that the waking mind cannot easily manage. That is why the text repeatedly recommends a simple nightly practice. Before going to sleep quietly, bring your problem or question to mind. Do not struggle with it. Do not analyze it endlessly. Instead, calmly hand it over to the subconscious mind. You might say inwardly with quiet confidence that the deeper wisdom of your mind knows the answer and will reveal it at the right time. Then let the matter go. Sleep follows naturally, and during the night, the subconscious mind continues its silent activity. The answer may come in several forms. Sometimes it appears in a dream expressed through images or symbols. At other times, the answer emerges the moment you awaken, as though it had been waiting patiently at the edge of awareness. Occasionally, it appears later in the day as a sudden insight or clear feeling about what to do. The teaching emphasizes that there is no need to force the process. The subconscious mind does not respond well to anxiety or urgency. It responds best to calm expectation. In that sense, handing a problem over before sleep is similar to placing a letter in a mailbox. Once the letter is sent, there is no need to chase the mail carrier down the street. The message is already on its way. Another quiet suggestion offered in the text is to avoid carrying fear or resentment into sleep. The emotional tone of the mind before bedtime has a powerful influence on the subconscious during the night. If a person falls asleep dwelling on anger, worry, or bitterness, those impressions continue echoing in the deeper mind throughout the night. The subconscious mind accepts them as instructions and continues working with those emotional patterns. For that reason, the teaching recommends entering sleep with thoughts of peace and goodwill. A few moments spent affirming harmony, forgiveness, and calm expectation can change the entire atmosphere of the mind. Instead of feeding the subconscious with anxiety, the person feeds it with trust. Sleep then becomes not only a period of physical restoration, but also a time of emotional renewal. The quiet darkness of night holds a certain mystery in this philosophy. While the outer world becomes still, an inner world continues moving with subtle intelligence. The conscious mind rests, yet something deeper remains awake, organizing, repairing. guiding. When morning arrives, the person often wakes with a sense of freshness that seems almost miraculous. Problems that felt overwhelming the night before may appear smaller. Solutions that once seemed distant may suddenly feel obvious. This is why the teaching treats sleep almost like a daily meeting with the deeper mind. Each night offers an opportunity to release burdens, to trust the quiet intelligence within, and to allow the subconscious mind to continue its work of healing and guidance. Instead of lying awake in restless worry, a person can learn to approach sleep with confidence. The day's concerns are placed gently into the hands of the deeper mind. The body relaxes, breathing slows, conscious thought fades, and in that peaceful darkness, the silent processes of life continue restoring strength, clarifying direction, and preparing the mind for the new day that waits beyond the horizon of sleep. As the discussion reaches its closing themes, attention turns to one of the most delicate and deeply personal areas of human life: marriage and relationships. Here, the same central principle appears again, the idea that the patterns we hold in the subconscious mind quietly shape the experiences we encounter. According to this teaching, many of the difficulties people experience in marriage do not arise suddenly or mysteriously. Instead, they often grow out of mental patterns that were never fully understood. The suggestion is not that people consciously wish for conflict or unhappiness. Rather, many individuals carry unexamined beliefs about love, partnership, and themselves. These beliefs settle into the subconscious mind and gradually influence the kinds of relationships they form. Someone who constantly expects disappointment may unknowingly select partners who reinforce that expectation. A person who secretly fears betrayal may interpret ordinary behavior as signs of disloyalty. Over time, these patterns shape both perception and behavior, creating the very difficulties the individual hoped to avoid. In this sense, the philosophy suggests that the subconscious mind plays a powerful role in the attraction of partners. The qualities we dwell upon most deeply tend to appear in the people we draw into our lives. If a person constantly thinks about loneliness, frustration, or distrust, those emotional patterns may guide their choices unconsciously. But if someone begins to focus on qualities such as kindness, understanding, honesty, and loyalty, the mind gradually aligns itself with those qualities. The advice offered to those seeking a partner is therefore quite specific. Instead of worrying about whom to meet or where to find them, focus inwardly on the kind of character you hope to share your life with. Picture a companion who is thoughtful, sincere, cooperative, and emotionally balanced. Imagine a relationship built on respect, trust, and mutual encouragement. As these qualities become familiar in the imagination, the subconscious mind begins recognizing them when they appear in real life. In this way, attraction becomes less about chance and more about mental alignment. The teaching also warns about the power of unconscious repetition. Many people experience the same kinds of relationship problems again and again without understanding why. One marriage may end in conflict only for the next relationship to follow the same pattern. From this perspective, the pattern persists because the underlying mental habits remain unchanged. If resentment, insecurity, or fear continues to operate in the subconscious mind, those emotional patterns influence behavior in subtle ways. They shape reactions, tone of voice, expectations, and interpretations of events. Eventually, they recreate the same difficulties in a new form. The solution proposed is not simply finding a different partner. The deeper change involves transforming the mental patterns themselves. When a person learns to replace suspicion with trust, resentment with goodwill, and fear with calm confidence, the emotional atmosphere surrounding relationships begins to change. Marriage itself is described in the text as a partnership requiring mutual understanding and emotional maturity. It cannot flourish when two people continually react to one another through habits of anger or criticism. One of the issues discussed openly is divorce. The teaching acknowledges that divorce has become increasingly common in many societies, yet it suggests that the deeper causes of marital breakdown often lie in misunderstandings of the mind's influence. Couples may enter marriage carrying unrealistic expectations or unresolved emotional patterns. When difficulties arise, they may blame each other entirely without recognizing how their own thinking contributes to the conflict. Suspicion is identified as one of the most destructive habits within a marriage. When a person constantly imagines betrayal or dishonesty, the relationship becomes strained by invisible tension. The partner who is suspected may feel misunderstood or unfairly judged. Over time, the emotional atmosphere becomes heavy with distrust. Another damaging pattern is resentment. Small grievances accumulate when they are not addressed with honesty and kindness. A thought repeated again and again, "I am being treated unfairly," or "my partner never understands me," gradually sinks into the subconscious mind. The longer such thoughts are repeated, the more they influence perception. Every new situation begins to appear through the lens of old resentment. Soon, even neutral actions may be interpreted as evidence of hostility. Nagging and constant criticism create a similar effect. Instead of encouraging growth and cooperation, repeated complaints often provoke defensiveness. The person receiving the criticism may begin withdrawing emotionally or responding with irritation. The relationship then becomes a cycle of reaction and counter-reaction. Brooding silently over perceived wrongs can be equally harmful. When someone holds on to hurt without expressing it constructively, the emotion continues to circulate within the mind. The subconscious mind absorbs the feeling and strengthens it. Eventually, the unspoken resentment influences behavior in subtle ways through tone distance or coldness. The teaching offers another piece of practical advice that may seem simple, but carries significant weight. Avoid publicizing marital grievances. Some individuals, when frustrated with their partner, share their complaints widely among friends or relatives. They describe every disagreement and rehearse every perceived injustice. Although this may feel like emotional release, it often reinforces the negative pattern in the mind. Each retelling deepens the sense of grievance. The subconscious mind continues absorbing the story until it becomes the dominant image of the relationship. Instead of healing the difficulty, repeated discussion may actually strengthen it. A more constructive approach is to turn inward first. Examine the thoughts and emotions being held toward the partner. Are they filled with criticism and blame, or with understanding and goodwill? When individuals change their inner attitude, the atmosphere of the relationship often begins to shift. This does not mean ignoring genuine problems or pretending everything is perfect. Rather, it means approaching those problems from a place of calm intention instead of emotional hostility. The central claim repeated in this closing section is that love itself is a powerful mental force. Love is described not merely as romantic feeling, but as an attitude of goodwill, patience, and respect. When two people maintain constructive mental habits, thinking kindly about one another, wishing each other success, and approaching disagreements with understanding, the relationship becomes more resilient. Difficult moments may still occur, but they do not escalate into lasting bitterness. The subconscious mind responds to the emotional tone maintained within the relationship. When that tone is dominated by anger or suspicion, conflict multiplies. But when it is guided by affection and cooperation, harmony gradually restores itself. In this way, the philosophy returns once again to its central theme. Thought patterns shape experience. The habits formed in the quiet chambers of the mind eventually express themselves in the visible world. This principle applies not only to health, success, or prosperity, but also to the most intimate human bonds. Marriage, like every other aspect of life, reflects the attitudes held within the mind. When those attitudes are rooted in love, goodwill, and constructive thinking, the relationship becomes a place of growth rather than conflict. And through that steady practice of kindness and thought and action, harmony finds its way back into the partnership. In the end, the message returns to a quiet but powerful idea. What we rehearse inwardly, our beliefs, images, and feelings, gradually shapes how life unfolds outwardly. The mind is not just observing the world, it is participating in it. So the real question becomes simple: what are you practicing within yourself each day? If this reflection resonated with you, consider liking the video and subscribing for more conversations like this.